On April 16, 2013, one of the greatest COD Zombies maps of all time released. That of course being Mob of the Dead. Even upon its release, many found it to be a breath of fresh air and a step in the right direction, given the at the time relatively lukewarm reception Black Ops 2 Zombies had. Contrary to today, people didn't really like Transit nor Die-Rise as much as they do today. Now, this isn't going to be a retrospective look back at Mob. Instead, I want to take a look at the Mob of the Dead we never got. Now, we've had some massive leaks surrounding Black Ops 2 Zombies. Not only have we had the beta builds which show us early map designs of Mob, Buried and Origins, and of course DLC 5, but we've also had design documents leak, which tell us a lot about the original concepts and original ideas for Mob that just never made it into the game. So we're going to take a look at some of the massive changes to Mob of the Dead that would have made the entire experience completely and utterly different. Instead of just usual small changes like, oh, a perk machine was rotated 45 degrees in this room. So before we begin, the first part of the video is going to be going over the concept documents, meaning the stuff that is mentioned here may or may not exist in any of the builds at all, and was either cut at the concepts or very early on. And a lot of this may also sound very familiar initially because this is a concept, of course. This is the original idea they wanted, so a lot of the ideas did stick, but also a good amount of them didn't, or were changed up considerably. So to start things off, Mob of the Dead was a very late concept in and of itself. A lot of the concept files mentioned Buried was supposed to be DLC 2, which also adds up with the Die-Rise loading screen which did tease Buried initially. Mob of the Dead's original name was going to be Helcatraz, and this is shown in a concept logo. The name Helcatraz did actually get used eventually in Black Ops 4, as it's used as the gauntlet mode for Black Ops 4's Blood of the Dead. This also won't be the last time you hear of Blood of the Dead in this video. So let's talk about the original concept for Mob. Now of course, the original idea was the same. You were going to be stuck on Alcatraz and you needed to escape somehow. But the way the map was going to be slightly different. When the map started, instead of you being told what character to revive, you got to choose who you wanted to be. All the inmates had the revive symbol on them and you got to pick, as long as you got there first of course. And it's not known how this would have worked in games of 4 people. Now one of the early concepts also mentioned the group were going to be 4 generic gangsters, similar to the unnamed Marines from World at War's Nacht and Verrucht, before deciding to change this to a proper cast. Once you revived yourself, you had to enter one of the cells and tear down a poster, which would reveal a folded map behind it, and you'd be prompted to pick it up. And once you pick it up, it would appear above a bed in a cell, which is interesting because you can't really enter any of the cells, and the escape map is plastered on the wall anyway in the final version. It's also not mentioned if the cell was in the spawn room or not, and in one of the beta leaks you did have to tear something off the wall to reveal the map anyway. Now this is where the main objective of the map was different. Instead of going around the map and picking up the keys to unlock certain areas for certain parts, you had to seek out corpses of your inmates who would have the keys on them. These inmates were also a part of the escape plan initially, but obviously died. And these corpses would have multiple spawns to avoid the map feeling repetitive. And given there were 5 keys, that means 3 random spawns per inmate corpse. Now that to me implies a slightly different story, since it's very heavily implied the crew we got in Mob are the only actual people on the island. And the fact we have these already 5 dead inmates implies to me that the breakout or whatever was going to be completely different. Maybe a prison riot or something before the zombies started appearing. Now similar to the final, the keys would open up areas for you to pick up the parts you need for the plane, and once the plane was built, there were 3 possible areas you would end up at, instead of just being the Golden Gate Bridge. Or well, I should say the Golden Gate Bridge was always going to be the first place you'd go to on your first escape, but every single escape after that is randomised. So what other 2 areas were planned? Well, one of them was Fort Point, which itself is a real place near Alcatraz. And there's also another place named Perk Factory, which appears to be completely unique, and going off the name, it sounds like a lucky kind of area. Anyway, upon escaping, the cutscene was slightly different. The screen would cut to black, and the players would be shell-shocked, barely surviving and crawling. Which to me sounds a bit of a direct callback to Nacta and Totem, which did start with a soldier in a plane crash. The original design documents also mentioned they wanted the plane to be a part of the debris to keep you locked in the area, and this can be somewhat seen in one of the early builds as well, where the plane is actually on the bridge instead of just, in the sea. Wherever you ended up at, they wanted this to be no man's land, similar to Griffin Station from Moon. You can pack a punch here, and that's about it. You can't survive here, and there would be no perk drops at all. Now one final change is there would be no chairs on the bridge. because at some point a portal would open up, and upon jumping into it you would find yourself in a single room. No doors, no weapons, there's only windows for the zombies to get through. But this room is where the electric chairs would be, and you would have no other option but to electrocute yourself here. And Treyarch were going to put in a slight troll, because when you're electrocuting yourself, the door would open, making you think you missed out on something by just a few seconds. But as you enter Afterlife, you go through the door, you see another portal, you go through here, and you're back in the spawn room. And similar to the final, your body is back there in the down position and the cycle continues again. Now what's interesting about this is there are some very early remains of this in the pre-release builds, which directly pit the electric chair room above the spawn room, but no remnants of this exist in the final if you use a mod menu to get there. So let's talk about gameplay changes now, because there were a lot of changes that were done that would have made Mob of the Dead much more scary and much more intense. So first of all, the atmosphere. It was going to be much more intense as said. When you entered Afterlife, the zombies would become ethereal, essentially being spirits similar to you. Instead of hearing the usual zombie grunts and groans, the spirits would be heard crying and begging for the player to kill them, giving the implication that these zombies are tortured souls, similar to the crew actually. Now unfortunately, Treyarch knew this was a bit too advanced even for the time and mentioned memory limits multiple times. Now Treyarch really did want to keep this feature in. There's multiple mentions saying they should try a shader to give the zombies a spirit-like appearance, or try and limit it to 2 models only. I don't know what they mean by 2 models only, but it didn't work because of memory limits. It really was pushing the console too much, and as such we don't see it in the final. If I had to assume, the zombie spirits probably would look very similar to the player when they enter Afterlife. Now speaking of Afterlife, it was also changed slightly, and it's also implied that Afterlife had no limits initially, because it's also mentioned if you kept on entering Afterlife in a round, the meter would deplete faster each and every time, meaning they may have scrapped the 1 per round limit in favour of unlimited Afterlives, which I assume means unlimited Afterlives if you were to willingly enter, but forced downs don't count. The Hell's Redeemer, or Hell's Retriever, was initially called Geronimo's Tomahawk, and Treyarch were undecided if this should be a wall-buy, a box exclusive weapon, or a side quest reward. And of course they decided on it being a side quest reward only. The design document states that how you would acquire the Tomahawk was going to be different. Instead of feeding hellhound heads or whatever, you would need to find a Native American ghost somewhere on the island, who I assume would be named Geronimo, since the original name of course, as said, was Geronimo's Tomahawk. And once you find him and speak to him, you would have to find the various relics of his scattered around the map, and you would need to cleanse Alcatraz by killing zombies near these Native American relics. The placement of them all would be randomised every time you play, and once you've done all of them, which is about 4, you would hear a ghostly whisper say, "Your prize is where my bones lie," and you would need to head down to the mines area, which is not the area you go to in the final. That area didn't exist at all, and yes, the mines area was a completely removed area, which we'll cover a bit more later on. But once you go to this removed mines area, you would see a new area has opened up, which would be a Native American burial chamber, and you can find the body that the spirit belonged to, and you could acquire the Tomahawk from here. There are also no mentions of upgrading the Tomahawk either. The design documents also state there was going to be some lore behind Geronimo's Tomahawk, saying the Tomahawk here was used by a Native American shaman to banish evil spirits, and was placed at Alcatraz to help suppress the curse of the island. Now, I'm unsure if this is based off any real events or folklore or whatever, since as you can probably tell, I'm a Brit, meaning anything involving Native Americans, history, or even American history in general, is just not taught here. But it does sound quite interesting. Much more interesting than dealing with a dog that sticks its head out of a wall anyway. Another thing is, when Treyarch were coming up with concepts for Geronimo's Tomahawk, an alternative name for it was going to be the Tombstone Tomahawk. So onto the Blundergat, which is arguably Mob of the Dead's most iconic weapon. Now I couldn't find any big changes for the Blundergat at all, but the concept documents do state that the Blundergat may have been more powerful, since in the document it states, the Blundergat is a blunderbuss stock merged with a barrel from a Gatling gun, making it far superior to a double barrel or even a quad barrel shotgun. And given a Gatling gun may have 6 barrels, well, I'll let you figure that one out. But the original upgrade path was going to be different. The concept documents also state that when killing zombies of it, zombies would have a rare chance of dropping a blood vial, which is one of the crafting materials you would need to upgrade. you could only obtain the Blundergat by the mystery box, unlike the final where you can get it in the mystery box, but you can also get it by collecting skulls in the Afterlife mode. So to upgrade the Blundergat to the Blundersplat, yes that's the original name, not the Acid Gat, you would need 10 blood vials that would be dropped by zombies, and would only be dropped by those killed with said Blundergat, alongside an ammo case and a fuse. Now, I know it may sound like the Blundersplat was going to be completely different from the Acid Gat. After all, it really does sound different. The way you upgrade it, the fact you need blood rather than acid. Well, unfortunately no. The upgraded Blundergat was just going to be the Acid Gat, it just had a completely different name. Another big change in Mob of the Dead. Well, of course, Brutus, we can't forget him. He's a very iconic part of the map, but he was going to be much more difficult to deal with as well. Instead of just being able to lock down doors, perks and shake the camera violently, he also had the ability to relock doors. His smoke grenade he detonates was supposed to be full on tear gas that would blur the player's vision, and using the mystery box had a Brutus troll as well. There would be a chance that instead of getting a weapon, or a teddy bear, an alarm would play that would summon Brutus. But the thing is, he wouldn't spawn instantly. He'd instead be added to the spawn rotation, which guarantees a completely random spawn from him. And there was also the possibility of multiple Brutus to spawn in one round, and they're called Bruti in the files. There did used to be a glitch that allowed multiple Bruti to spawn, and it's about as chaotic as you can imagine. Most people who performed this glitch didn't last too long, because it really was that difficult. And another small change is his name was supposed to be Brutus the Bull. So Mob of the Dead is also known for its Easter egg, arguably being one of the most easiest to do out the entire series. And there were going to be some small changes with this as well. The document states there was going to be a slightly different story to the cast's life. It states that Sal, Finn and Billy were caught before they even got the plan underway and punished accordingly, and it was Al who had something to do with them being caught and punished, possibly implying he snitched. And this is why Al was never killed in this version of Mob of the Dead, which is much more different than the final audio logs which state the plan never got underway because of the constant arguing. So they just killed Al on the rooftop and got the death penalty, which explains how all four of them died. The document also has no mention of Pop Goes the Weasel either. It merely states Al the Weasel must be on board for the quest to be completed. Again, no mention of the deathmatch on the bridge, but I feel like the original ending might have been kinda similar, as in the crew discover Al probably snitched on them, and then they go to kill him as revenge. The Samantha's Lullaby Easter egg, which is obtained by doing absolutely nothing and dying out when the map spawns in, mentions something about getting fake credits. I have no idea what that even means, and I don't assume it means fake out where the game would restart because this was always determined to be a game over. So what fake credits means I really couldn't tell you. The Jumpscare Easter egg was planned to have a slightly scarier face. In the concept documents, this face was shown as a reference. This does not mean this is the image they were going to use, but they wanted something similar to this. I also noticed this image looks vaguely more ghost-like, which to me looks perfect for the heavy emphasis on spirits that they wanted to go for initially. So let's talk about one of the biggest things with Mob of the Dead, and that of course is the map. This was only discovered thanks to the original beta builds. Now the map to Mob of the Dead was infinitely bigger than what we got, and in an ironic twist, Blood of the Dead from Black Ops 4 uses the original map layout they wanted for Mob originally. There were leaked early builds which surfaced in late 2024 that show the original map layout was pretty much the entirety of what we got in Blood of the Dead in Black Ops 4, minus a couple of areas here and there, and to a lesser extent Alcatraz in Warzone and Blackout. Now unfortunately, I really struggled to get the maps to load in Xenia. Every single time I tried to load up the DLC beta builds, they just crashed every single time. And if they did play, they would crash after about 30 seconds or so. So I have had to borrow some clips and footage that have already been pre-recorded by other people. So for this segment, any footage I use that isn't mine is going to be credited appropriately, as you will probably see on screen in a moment. Because I really wanted to try and record some of this footage myself, but as I said, I don't have a modded Xbox 360, and Xenia really sucks ass at playing these games. Hopefully they can fix that in the future, but anyway, back on topic. So yeah, most of Blood's layout is here in Black Ops 2, in its blockout phase at the very earliest. Now the term blockout is used when a map enters its very early stages. It's more of a concept layout, and is done in an incredibly basic way, often without any kind of details, and obviously gets changed and improved as the map goes on. In fact, this is one of the earliest known photos of Mob of the Dead, so you can see how early this is. Very basic props, no details, you know, just like a proof of concept. So in the spawn room, you know when I mentioned about how the original cycle ended and you would end up back here? Well, this can be seen in one of the early builds, where the portals were directly above the door but invisible to the naked eye. And this is where the electric chair room would be, in this completely empty room, but oddly there's no windows for the zombies to get through in this build. Now going near the area near the cafeteria, there was an alternative way to the 3rd floor. There is an unused staircase on its way up here, complete with a shotgun wall by. It's also seen in a very early screenshot that, to be honest, really doesn't look like mob at all. The entire prison area itself was also way more open. There were no lava pits, instead you could run across all 3 levels without any issue. So that area where you feed the Hellhound head, it wasn't there because this was done at a time where Geronimo's ghost was going to be how you get the Tomahawk. So far the map changes we've looked at are just relatively small, simple changes like you'd expect. But when we get to the laundry room is arguably where the big map changes come in. Not only are there lines for a portal here in the original beta builds, but when you entered here you'd see another door named Mine Tunnels, which is a completely removed area, and here you could go underground and find a minecart which when used would transport you across the map, similar to fast travel from Blood of the Dead, which I believe is just the exact same, just minus the minecart. There's also a very unusually well made corridor stemming from the laundry room to the room with double tap. Most barriers like this tend to have a small amount of collision for the zombies, but then just cuts out afterwards. But here the entire pathway is completely walkable, with full collision for the walls too, and a small amount of props, which makes me believe this could be a removed playable area. Anyway, back to the completely cut areas. If you played Blood of the Dead, many of these areas will look familiar, because practically everything here would be later used in it. In fact, I believe the only areas from Blood of the Dead that are not featured in the Black Ops 2 version are Richter's lab and the Warden's house. Now the docks are also much more extended. Instead of a completely walled off area with that crafting table, that was gone. Same for the area that contains Juggernog. You could just cross that little bridge and make your way to this building here too. Now unfortunately, everything is missing here in the release, even if you mod your way over here, but in one of the beta builds it is way more packed with this stuff. And yes, this is where you would pick up some of the items you needed for the plane. The roof itself also went through multiple revisions. The room which you enter to access the roof was there, but it didn't take you to the roof. Instead, there was a door here that took you to the catwalk from Blood of the Dead. Now the roof itself was also completely different. You could take the gondola straight to it. The entire place also seemed, well, just empty and completely different. So how would you access the roof in this version if the original doorway didn't exist? Well, funnily enough, the door from the catwalk to the infirmary was the roof access point, if I'm making sense with that. I hope the footage I'm using is making it clear, but yeah. So in a build closer to the final, the room seemed a lot less cluttered, but at the same time you couldn't run around the end to circle back. The zombies also had a barrier up here as well, instead of just jumping up from somewhere. And at this point the gondola was gone. Now as for the bridge area, not much has changed. But remember how the original idea was the plane would be destroyed and part of the map debris? Well, in the early builds we can see it. So it's like the plane crashes onto the bridge rather than our cast falling 500 feet and surviving. And with that, I believe I've covered most of the bigger stuff surrounding Mob of the Dead. So that was a look at Alcatraz, the Mob of the Dead we never got. But with that, that's the end of this video. Thank you for watching and have a great day.